morning, everyone, or good afternoon, I guess, depending on kind of where you are. What we're going to do today is kind of talk about what the project was that our friends over in Darlington County did. So let's go ahead and get started. And I guess the first question for Terrence or Sherman is, what motivated you guys to take on an open data project?
Well, good morning. And what motivated Darlington County to take on this project is with me coming in for Darlington County, I've actually been here for about 3 months now, and I noticed that Darlington County wasn't very transparent with a lot of the information they have for the taxpayers, especially the budget process and a lot of the financial data. With my experience with Socrata, I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of bring Socrata in and start working on ways to create a more transparent budget for Darlington County. I wanted to give them the opportunity to view some of our expenditures and some of the revenues and things like that. So I thought Socrata would be the perfect tool to use in reference to moving this project forward in reference to open data. In addition, I also wanted to provide staff with some innovative concepts and practices that are used with some of the larger municipalities from my experience in local government. If we start talking about cities like Baltimore and the state of Maryland, they're using what's called CityStat, which I thought is a very great tool, but in the same token, I wanted to gradually transition Darlington County to that. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring on this open data platform and slowly expose Darlington County to fiscal transparency and things of that nature. And plus, most importantly, it creates a meaningful dialogue between county council and staff when we start talking about process improvement and fiscal transparency.
Excellent. And we did get a question in from someone. Did you get any requests from citizens around the data that helped motivated it, or was there any interest on the citizen side for when you guys were looking to take on this project?
There was not a direct interest from the residents per se. This was more stemmed around questions and just around transparency and asking questions about, hey, I want to see this. Hey, is that available? Granted, when you look at our last year's budget, all of that information is available, but in the same token, it's not packaged as well as Socrata can do it in reference to the display component. So to directly answer that question, we didn't get any direct inquiries from the residents, but in the same token, there was some interest from other departments in reference to, hey, is there a way we can see this online? Is there a way we can manipulate the data to show it to the residents? Also, my finance director, he's got a comment as well.
Yeah, this is Sherman Dibble. And again, I have been here for a number of years prior to Mr. Arrington coming in, and it's not so much directly from the citizens, but we do get questions continually. What is this? What is this in the budget? Either from department heads, from citizens council. So as Mr. Arrington introduced this, the idea of being able to point them to a central location where they can look this up is intriguing that way. So.
Okay, perfect. And for those of you that are listening, as always, please make sure that you send in your questions, and we will make sure that we get them asked. So if we move on to the next question, how did Darlington County go ahead and determine that the open data portal was the right solution?
Well, that kind of goes back to a little bit of history that I have with Socrata. Prior to coming to Darlington County, I worked for a municipality in the state of Maryland, and I had talked to one of the representatives from Socrata about open data. In addition, the mayor, Governor Martin O'Malley, who was the governor at the time, was also using Socrata, and they were going through this whole fiscal transparency as it relates to CityStat and StateStat. Governor O'Malley was well known for his efforts with CityStat, but he also pushed the same initiative on the state level. At the time, and he was the mayor of Baltimore, but now he was the governor when I actually worked in the state of Maryland at that time. But anyway, he actually had pushed the same software out to municipalities all across the state, and wanted everyone to embrace the same concept when it comes to fiscal transparency and city stats. So that's how I was initially exposed to it. But in the meantime, while I was talking with the representative that I was working with at the time, I thought it was a great tool, and it gives you the opportunity to paint a realistic portrait of what the budget is, and then when you start talking about initiatives and the vision behind department directors and their initiatives, I thought this would be a great tool. And also, as you see there from the bullet point, within the next couple of years, this will become the new normal when you start talking about fiscal transparency, setting goals and tracking how you achieve those goals. And when we start talking about Darlington County, it's a rural county and they don't have exposure to a lot of this technology. So my goal is to kind of get them on that path. That way, within the next couple of years, Darlington County won't be so far behind. They would have some exposure to Socrata and open data and understand the whole concept between city stat, state stat, and the importance of visualizing performance metrics and things of that nature.
Okay, great. We had another question that came in, and I'm not sure if you guys are doing this. Are you doing anything with like lean or anything around that to determine priorities at this point?
No, not at this point. Coming in with Darlington County, my main priority has been just the budget. But going forward, Socrata also has that same platform when you look at Kansas City, where they have well, not necessarily directly associated with Lean Six Sigma, but they do have goals and initiatives that are set, and they measure how they are, where they are in reference to achieving or meeting those goals. But as far as Lean Six Sigma, we haven't went through and looked at all of our processes yet. The goal is to first start with county council and get them acclimated with this concept and the technology. Again, going back to rural communities generally don't have exposure, or a lot of the individuals that are on council are not familiar with this technology. For example, my council, a lot of them are older and they're not really tech savvy. So providing them with performance metrics, showing them the charts and graphs may be a little overwhelming for them. So I have to kind of baby step them into that process, and then setting goals and initiatives. That's something that they've had challenges with, and they've never really done it in the past. So I think this is just the first step to getting them to that point and saying, hey, here's what we can do with this technology at this point. What are your thoughts on setting goals and initiatives for the next year, and we measure how we're meeting those goals using this same technology.
Okay, great.
And I also have another, Sherman has a comment as well if you want to.
Oh, just again, I was in the county when Mr. Arrington came, and I had not heard of Socrata, so the idea of looking at it is something new, but when you can look at making it as easy as possible, that's the piece that I like. The step forward things of setting up the goals and everything, that's a step down the road for this group. But I do, again, just see the possibilities of making it that much easier to interact with whomever is giving the question. So.
Okay, perfect. And then, like with any project, could you talk a little bit around the challenges you encountered while implementing your portal, and how were they addressed?
Well, you want to take?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off on that because it's, again, Mr. Arrington and I were working on this together, obviously, but a lot of looking at the financials fell on my plate, and it's a step. I had to get our financial system is through QS1, which is out of Spartanburg area, and I did have to get them online and ask them to help me kind of piece together that. So that's the one thing that is again, it wasn't difficult on my end other than getting the context together of saying, hey, what do we have to do to implement this type spreadsheet? So they did help me, and they were very helpful in that way. So that is one thing that I know I had to do on my end. So,
and just to kind of piggyback off of what Sherman was saying, QS1, they're actually very innovative. They're up to date as far as the technology. So some of the things that we were talking to them about as far as the implementation phase of this project, they were on board with it. It wasn't anything that they couldn't do. They have way more technology than we even have as an organization. We've been to their site. They have the capacity to manipulate the data to help us achieve our goal. So QS1, or our financial software vendor, was key and they were willing to work with us as far as whatever we needed in reference to making this work. And then our project lead, he also helped facilitate a workshop with staff. I thought this would be a great opportunity to pretty much have him show staff what this technology will do from an accountability standpoint. That way, when they're putting their budgets together, they'll need to know that the public will have the ability to manipulate. They'll have the ability to look at transactions down to the actual check numbers and PO numbers. So when you start looking at transparency, I thought it would be a great opportunity to loop our project lead in, have a meeting with department directors, talk about what we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish, talk about how we want to take this software to the next level. And granted, as listed in the final bullet, there are definitely some additional concerns in reference to how Darlington County is going to respond to this, because it's very different. And one thing about rural communities is they tend to like things to remain the same. With me coming in and being a younger administrator, I definitely want to kind of nudge them a little bit more with innovative things and start talking about the value of innovation, start talking about fiscal transparency, start exposing them to a lot of these things. So I guess overall, implementation is the easy part. The goal is trying to gauge how council will respond to this information, because a lot of them are already not really familiar with technology. Some of them are not really familiar with email. So it's really a soup to nuts approach to this. So I thought using Socrata and just doing the basic open Gov portal will help get us where we're trying to go.
Okay, perfect. All right. And then how did your team deploy the portal? I mean, what kind of work hours or workflow was affected?
At this point, as far as the team goes, it's just me and Sherman. So we've been kind of tag teaming this particular project, and then we've looped in Andrew Ho, who's our project lead. We've really taken a very strategic approach to this, considering we're right in the middle of budget. So as far as the team, we are the team, and as far as the staff hours, I mean, we're working late. We haven't really been tracking hours. It's just a matter of we understand what our goals are, and we just punt football back and forth to each other. Hey, you work on this, I work on that. You make this phone call, I'll make that phone call. So in the same token, I wouldn't say that it has directly affected staff hours, but in the same token, going forward, I think once we fully launch the portal, staff will probably use it to their advantage, especially when they're looking at their budget for next year. So it's kind of one of those things. We haven't tracked our hours yet at this point. We just want to get it going, and then we'll see how everyone responds from there on.
Okay.
Tell me if you have no. Okay.
Yeah, we just got another question in around, have you guys seen any reduction in like freedom of information requests or, increased engagement from the community or anything like that so far? And I know it's still early.
Right, it's very early, and just for the audience, we plan on going live with this July 1st. So I think, just on my overall assessment of the response I've gotten from the public coming in, that this is going to be a great tool, because there's always a request for information. Now, have we seen an increase? That we don't know yet. But the good thing is the public will have the ability to go on there and get their own information. They'll still have the option of requesting it from the clerk of council or requesting whatever information they need. But the key is having a platform where the public can go on there and get their own information. My concern is that a lot of the more senior population will say, hey, I'm not used to using technology. I'd rather send in a request and rather than going and getting it myself, because I'm just not familiar with smartphones or tablets and technology. So at this point, we don't know right now what kind of response we're going to get from the public in reference to freedom of information, but the anticipation is that it won't change very much, because they'll have the ability to get information off of the website themselves. And I plan on facilitating a workshop at some point where we'll be able to educate the public on how to utilize this software.
Okay. And then another question came in. How often are you planning on updating your data sets? Have you guys looked at that? Do you have any thoughts around that? Because that's always a big question that we hear.
Sure. And right now, again, being that we're looking at July 1, I was just talking to QS1 again, our financial services. and we are looking at right now a monthly update. We'll see how that works and what. But again, we're getting ready to start in July 1, so we're going to see and work with that as a starting point.
Okay, perfect. All right, and let's go ahead and move on. As a rural community, and I think we discussed this a little bit, but what are your unique challenges that larger organizations may not consider?
I'm going to speak on the bullet points because I thought I captured some really good bullet points. And honestly, larger organizations are more, well, as I have here, are fiscally strong and have no objection to fiscal transparency, change, or the use of technology. They understand that especially when you're trying to recruit a lot of the younger professionals and things of that nature, they like the ability to be able to find data for themselves. Whereas an older rural community like where I am in Darlington County, all of these concepts are a little uncommon to them. I mean, fiscal transparency in itself is something that they're not familiar with, and especially when you couple it with the use of technology and you start talking about improving productivity and most importantly accountability. Typically, rural counties don't have a lot of these things in place to track how you're meeting goals or to measure productivity. And then Darlington County, unfortunately, is one of those counties, so we're going to go through a variety of exercises to really bring them up to speed in reference to what's being done now. So that's definitely a challenge for Darlington County. And my second bullet, the new normal. Nowadays, a lot of this fiscal transparency, it's more so as a movement. And a couple of municipalities that I've worked for are embracing this concept of fiscal transparency because residents want to know what's going on. They're more engaged, especially those that are more hip to technology. Fiscal transparency is definitely something that they're looking at. And then the third bullet, rural counties are not as enthusiastic about growth. Some counties don't want to grow. Some counties may be more interested in doing things the same because they're not familiar with change. They don't like change. They may not have the staff that is familiar or plugged into a lot of what's going on now. So the idea of taking on a new initiative may not be something that they're interested in doing. And most importantly, the next bullet, you have to gain trust. A lot of times it takes a while to really gather that trust from elected officials, especially with me not being from the community here. You've got to gain the trust and support that you need from council to push these initiatives forward. And in my case, I'm a manager from outside of the region, so that's been something that I've been working on, building that trust and support. And council have expressed concerns in the past about not having all of the information they need in reference to the budget. So even at this short period of time, with me only being here for a few months, I provided them with some tools in reference to transparency that has given them the opportunity to see the raw numbers and understand how revenues affect our expenditures and things like that. And I'll even let Sherman comment on some of that, but we've definitely spent a lot of time just diving into the data, looking at trends, and this whole open data platform will allow us to really visually show it to them from year to year, and we'll be able to access it online directly from the website. So it'll be a learning curve for council, but in the same token, a lot of our younger residents, especially when we start looking at recruiting young professionals, when we get our new website, which also will be up and running on July 1st, all of these pieces, all of these components will come together, and you'll really see the benefit of open data and fiscal transparency. And I'll punt to Sherman as well if you have any other comments related to the challenges that you've experienced just being here for a short period of time.
Yeah. Again, it is within the rural community, obviously, and I think many in the audience probably today are from those, maybe some of those same kind of communities and whatever. So we all know the struggles, the objections that you can receive. But when you look back and you take into consideration that you are being questioned, whether it's just by the county council, whether there are some of the citizens that want to check and ask and whatever, having that central platform makes sense to me instead of having to take time to go and print this out, find this information. If I can direct all of those questions back to a central point of here's where we have it. This is going to be the same as what I have in my system. If you come here for me to print out a piece of paper for you, it's already here. You can look at it whenever you want to look at that. I just like that idea, and just, again, see where it's going to take us that way, even within a rural setting. So.
And also keep in mind, I'll talk a little bit about Darlington County. Even the last year's budget, I mean, it was just a bunch of documents pretty much printed. A big packet was advanced to council, but in the same token, it was just all of the printed worksheets. So we are really working hard to change the culture and expose these guys to a lot of what's being done now as far as practices. There's a lot of things that I have in the pipeline that's going to come after July 1st. But it goes back to what I was saying about the new normal, and the new normal is fiscal transparency. Being able to look at the numbers, being able to compare what's happening from year to year, and most importantly, it's all about change and really becoming more innovative in reference to how we execute the day-to-day operations of municipal government, especially nowadays when you have a lot of fiscal challenges going on, even with me coming in with the budget, just looking at a lot of the activity. Council being able to do that themselves will help. It'll also help them answer a lot of their own questions. So it's not so much as, hey, I went online and I saw this myself. But again, we're really going to have to take that soup to nuts approach in reference to how we deal with the county council, especially in a rural community.
Okay, great. So the next, we've got a few questions I'll hold till the end. But I guess the next question is, looking back, I know you guys are just getting close to going live. What would you have done differently?
I think that at this point, I wouldn't do anything differently. I think that overall our goal is to take a baby step approach to this and not overwhelm council with the open data platform. Because first of all, it really goes back to what level of user they are in reference to technology. Some of them are not familiar with the website. Some of them may not even know how to go through data sets and things like that and manipulate the data to find the information that they're specifically looking for. So as I have in the second bullet, they're not ready for the full gamut. And when I classify the full gamut, it's similar to what Kansas City is doing with their KC Stat dashboard. Full dashboard, you'll see what their goals and initiatives are. They're measurable. I mean, we're not really ready for that. At this point, I've got to get them to the point where they need to identify what their goals are for the year, and then we track going forward. But overall, I think our approach as far as taking baby steps to this and just exposing them to the bare basics of what open data is about and fiscal transparency, that'll get us where we need to be, and then we'll build on that.
Okay. So for those people listening, please go ahead and send in any questions that you may have. I have a couple of questions that people asked that I was kind of holding. One is, how did you guys think about privacy, for example, in your financial transactions? Are you displaying full names, or did you work with your vendor? We have a few people that ask questions because I think they're starting to think through the same kinds of things you are as well.
Well, yeah, we are. I mean, obviously that's very important. So it would depend, and that's part of still what is the discussion going forward, just making sure that even though we're going to give them, hey, here's what we spent, and, not trying to hide what was spent, but we do have to protect the privacy in certain areas. So we are taking that consideration and seeing how that kind of rolls forward as we move forward in this process.
Okay. Did you work with your vendor on that? I think you said QS1. Did they help with that, or is that something that you did once you pulled the data out?
Yeah, no, we're working with them currently. Those pieces are the things that we are going to, again, still question or still make sure modify that it is what we want to tell everybody, but also protecting those that we have to protect for different circumstances.
Sure. And actually, I got a follow-up question on what kind of recommendations would you guys give when people start working with, their ERP vendor about things they should look at and things they should think about?
Recommendations. Well, ultimately, my recommendation is it really just starts with having that conversation with council. Of course, they are the representatives of the public, and saying, hey, in reference, first, you want to make sure they understand what fiscal transparency is. I think it really starts with education and seeing what kind of response you get from your council members when you start talking about fiscal transparency. You also can do a community survey, and you can ask residents, what are their thoughts? How do they feel about, fiscal transparency, government transparency, and just kind of putting it out there. Granted, you don't want to put everything out there because there has to be a certain level of privacy, but in the same token, in reference to how taxpayer dollars are spent, you want to make sure that you have the support, and that when you start paying for a software, that you're going to get what you're going to get what you're paying for. It's going to be useful to the public, and they're going to see some value in it. So, in my opinion, I've really started this off with just education and telling council, hey, if you want to see the numbers, because that's what they've been asking for. We want to see the numbers. We want to see the numbers. I have a platform that will show you the information that you're looking for. It's just a matter of training and development as far as making sure they're up to speed with how to use the technology. So it really goes back to education and finding out what are some of the things that they want to look at. What do you want to see? Do you want to see the budgets? Do you want to see how we move through the budget from each fiscal year to the next? Of course, as Sherman said, we're going to send the data sets in monthly. So each month they'll be able to compare the activity from one month to the other. So it just really depends on what are some of the things that council wants to see, and then you work or you build from there forward.
Okay. And then the last question we have is more, it sounds like you guys are gearing up for a pretty big launch between your new website and Socrata, especially in a rural community. We've had a few folks ask, any recommendations that you have around kind of marketing now that, when you do your launch, or things that you think about, getting the word out?
We've been working with our project lead. We're going to do what's called a launch party. In the same token, it's going to be an opportunity to really loop council in. We're going to show them how it works. We're going to give them some details. I mean, as far as marketing is concerned, on our new website, we're going to have that on there that they'll have the ability to look at the budget. I've already been kind of putting plugs in with council about what's coming. So we've been doing I've been doing a lot of internal marketing as far as what the public will be able to see. We actually have regular attendees at our council meeting as far as on the media. They have a seat at the table, and they're always there, so they know that this is coming as well. So they'll have the opportunity to see the software in action once we get to that launch party, which will be probably around the first council meeting in July. So we're definitely excited about that, and we want to get as much momentum under it as we can. We don't have a public information officer here in this county, but in the same token, we have to kind of execute a lot of our marketing abilities on our own, or whatever we can. Go ahead.
And I think also, this is Sherman again, just also the ability, while he's selling it to council, talking to department heads and having them see and realize, hey, I can go on this website and pull these things up, look at what's going on, look what has been recorded against mine, if they have questions that way. They'll be able to see it also. So I think having them kind of see the abilities of what they're going to be able to take from that platform and either ask questions or go forward with it, I think as they buy into it also, it's going to help just other people realize what they can get out of that platform. So,
and most importantly, it speaks for itself. When you have if you have the opportunity your audience, if you haven't had the opportunity to see it in action, I recommend it, because it's a great platform where you can actually visualize how you're moving through this budget process after it's appropriated to the actual next fiscal year when the spending occurs. You'll have the ability to compare it month to month, or however you want to do it. If you want to do it quarterly, you want to do it bi-weekly, it's pretty much whatever the organization chooses in reference to how they want to update the data. But for the most part, I think that the key is council will have the ability to see month to month how we're doing. We have the monthly financial reports. We have quarterly financial reports that's going to be coming, but in the same token, to visualize that information is going to be key, especially if you can do it on the website and you don't have to request information from the clerk of council. It's all readily available on the website. So I think that's going to be a true selling point for the residents.
I want to thank you guys for joining us today. We had some great questions from our audience as well, so I also want to thank them. And I want to wish everyone a great rest of their day or afternoon. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the webcast. Thank you for joining us today.